90% of people would not survive in such conditions. You are a cowboy in the middle of the endless prairie, your matches are wet from the pouring rain, and the nearest town is 3 days away. A cold night is coming, and without a fire, you are doomed. But the pioneers of the Wild West knew dozens of ways to get fire from. These people turned fire-making into a high art of survival. They used flint and steel when others had only wet matches. They knew the secrets of the fire plow and knew how to strike a spark from the most unexpected objects. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how an ordinary bottle of whiskey could become a life-saving lighter, and why every cowboy carried a piece of tinder fungus in his pocket. What if I told you that the most reliable way to get fire didn't require matches or flint? Settlers in the Wild West adopted the fire plow technique from Native Americans, a method that worked even in the most hopeless conditions. It was a method in which 2 sticks were turned into a source of vital flame. Many simply did not realize how much time and effort it took to cut down even one large tree. They looked at hectares of forest and thought there would be enough material for an entire city. But in practice, selecting suitable, straight, healthy trees of the same diameter turned into a long and exhausting search. The second element was a wooden stick made of a harder wood, such as oak or ash. This stick was moved vigorously along the groove, creating friction. The secret was in the correct angle of inclination and constant pressure. With intense friction, wood dust began to accumulate at the end of the groove. This dust gradually heated up and darkened, turning into a smoldering ember. The whole process required patience and the right technique. It took several minutes. Another mistake was the wrong location of the future house. It could be built in a low-lying area where water accumulated, or on a hill exposed to the wind. Understanding the landscape and its features came only with experience, often paid for with harsh winters. Misjudging one's own strength was the most common mistake. The enthusiasm of the early days was quickly replaced by an exhausting routine. Many projects remained unfinished, becoming monuments to human ambition and the harsh reality of the frontier. The technique required physical endurance. The movements had to be quick and rhythmic, without stopping. Many beginners made the mistake of stopping to rest, which caused the wood dust to cool down and required them to start over. They underestimated the amount of food and supplies needed during construction. The work required thousands of calories a day, and supplies dwindled before their eyes. Construction was often interrupted by the need to hunt or forage for food. This ancient method proved that a person could obtain fire with only natural materials and knowledge. It did not depend on industrial goods and worked in all climatic conditions. The ability to use a fire plow made a person truly independent in the wilderness. It is interesting to see how this technique is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? Do you agree that such skills were critical for survival in the Wild West? Want to know the main secret of every experienced cowboy? Flint and steel were the main companions of any traveler in the Wild West. This duo, proven over centuries, guaranteed fire in almost any conditions. Every Flint is a hard mineral that can produce sparks when struck against steel. The best specimens were brought from the east, but experienced travelers knew how to find suitable stones in the local mountains. Flint had to have sharp edges and a dense structure without cracks. The striker was a curved strip of hardened steel. Its shape had been perfected over generations. The C-shaped bend ensured the correct angle of impact and protected the fingers from sparks. Many cowboys made the technique of striking sparks required skill and precision. The flint was held in one hand and the striker in the other. With a sharp sliding motion, the striker was run along the sharp edge of the flint. The secret to success lay in the preparation of the tinder. The best tinder was considered to be a specially treated fungus called Fomes fomentarius. This fungus was boiled in a solution of saltpeter, then dried and ground into fine. When special tinder was not available, charred fabric was used. Pieces of linen or cotton cloth were placed in an iron can with a small hole and heated over a fire. The result was a material that the axe handle also required constant care. It was made from strong and elastic wood species, such as hickory or ash. The handle had to be smooth, without knots, and perfectly fitted to the owner's hand. The process of starting a fire began with preparing kindling. Thin, dry twigs about the thickness of a pencil. They were placed in a small pile next to the place where sparks were struck. Experienced pioneers could get a fire going in a minute, even in difficult conditions. They knew that success depended on the quality of preparation. Good flint, a sharp striker, and properly prepared tinder. Flint and steel never failed. They were not affected by moisture like matches and did not run out like kerosene in a lamp. This simple set was a symbol of independence. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of frontier carpenters, which you have definitely not heard of. After the logs were chopped, the settler was faced with the task of turning them into building blocks. It was possible to build with round logs, but this left large gaps, and the house itself looked rough. What you are about to learn will surely surprise you. In the saloons of the Wild West, broken bottle shards littered the floor after every fight, but experienced travelers knew that an intact glass bottle could be a life-saving tool for making fire. This method worked in clear weather and did not require any additional materials. The principle of the solar lighter is based on the ability of glass to focus the sun's rays into a single point. A round bottle filled with clean water became a powerful lens. The water enhanced the effect. To create such a lighter, the bottle was completely filled with clean water without air bubbles. It was important that the glass was transparent, without cracks or scratches. Even small defects could scatter the sun's rays and reduce the effectiveness of the device. The bottle was held between the sun and the tinder at a distance of 10-15 centimeters from the flammable material. By slowly moving the bottle, they found the point where the sun's rays converged into the brightest spot. At this point, the temperature could reach. The final stage was the finishing chipping. Here, a wide carpenter's axe came into play. The carpenter, moving backwards, made precise and accurate blows along the grain, removing thin shavings and leveling the surface to almost perfect smoothness. The process required patience and a steady hand. The focal spot had to be held in one place for several seconds or even minutes. Gradually, the tinder began to smoke, then smolder, and finally burst into a bright flame. This method was especially appreciated by scouts and hunters who did not want to give themselves away with smoke from a fire plow or the sound of flint striking a tinderbox. The solar lighter worked completely. Cowboys quickly learned to use not only bottles, but also other glass objects. The bottom of a broken bottle, a lens from glasses, or even a piece of ice on a frosty sunny day. Anything could become a tool for making fire. The main limitation of the method was its dependence on weather conditions. On a cloudy day or at dusk, the solar lighter was useless. Therefore, wise travelers always had several ways of obtaining fire, and some craftsmen learned to make permanent solar lighters by polishing pieces of clear quartz or other minerals. These lenses were stronger than glass and lasted for years. They became true family heirlooms, passed down from father to son. Ready to learn the most important secret of all fire masters? Without good tinder, even the brightest sparks are useless. The pioneers of the Wild West knew dozens of types of natural tinder. Tinder fungus looks like a hard growth on a tree trunk, usually gray-brown in color. Inside, it has a spongy structure with many small pores. It is this porous interior that became valuable tinder after special processing. They collected tinder fungus in dry weather, selecting only healthy specimens without signs of rot. The hard outer crust was cut off with a knife, exposing the soft inner part, which was reddish or brown. To improve the properties of the tinder, it was boiled in a solution of wood ash or saltpeter. The ash contained potash, which made the material more susceptible to sparks. After boiling, the slices were dried again and stored in a dry place, wrapped in leather. Cutting these joints required incredible precision. The master first marked the outline of the future joint and then carefully selected the wood with an axe and chisel, if available. Each joint was individually adjusted to ensure maximum fit. Experienced trappers and hunters always carried a supply of tinder fungus with them in special tinder boxes. Small metal boxes. These boxes protected the tinder from moisture and mechanical damage. In the next chapter, you will learn how to turn ordinary items from your luggage into effective tools for making fire. Every traveler in the Wild West had a knife in their arsenal, a universal tool for hundreds of different tasks, but few people knew that the same knife, in skilled hands, could be an excellent means of obtaining. The principle of this method is based on the same friction as the fire plow, but using metal. The blade of a knife or any other iron object was vigorously rubbed against a dry wooden surface, creating fine shavings and heating them to the ignition temperature. Soft woods such as pine, spruce, or poplar were best suited for this purpose. The wood had to be completely dry, the iron object was held at an acute angle and scraped quickly across the wood, creating fine shavings. That is, the front and rear walls of the house continued to grow upward, but each subsequent crown was made shorter than the previous one. This formed two triangular gables. It was the easiest way to create a slope for the future roof. As soon as the first signs of smoldering appeared, a thin haze and a characteristic smell, the iron was removed and the smoking shavings were carefully transferred to the prepared tinder. Light puffs of air. This method was especially appreciated by cowboys who spent a lot of time in the saddle. They always had a knife with them, and suitable wood could be found almost anywhere. There was no need to carry additional equipment or look for special stones. In addition to a knife, they used any iron objects with a sharp edge. Horseshoes, tools, even sharp stones with a high iron content. The main thing was that the material was hard enough to create intense friction. This method was especially useful in winter, when other methods might not work due to humidity or frost. Iron and wood were always at hand, and moisture had less effect on their effectiveness than on flint or tinder. Did you know that the pioneers' weapons could save their lives in a completely unexpected way? Flintlock rifles and pistols, which were the main weapons of the Wild West era, had a built-in mechanism for striking sparks. In a critical situation, these weapons could become a life. The flintlock consisted of a trigger with a clamped flint and a steel striker. When the trigger was pulled, the trigger struck the striker with force, striking a string. The procedure for turning a weapon into a flintlock was simple. First, you had to make sure that the weapon was unloaded and safe. Then a small amount of dry tinder was placed on the shelf where the gunpowder was usually stored. The flint in the trigger had to be sharp and well secured. When the trigger was pulled, the sparks fell directly onto the tinder on the shelf. If the tinder was of good quality and completely dry, it ignited instantly. The main thing was to act quickly and carefully transfer the burning tinder to the prepared kindling. This process consisted of two stages, caulking and plastering. The first stage, caulking, involved filling the main space between the crowns with sealant. The most affordable and popular material for this was dried moss. But what if the weather was so bad that even the most reliable methods didn't work? Ready to learn the secret of all-weather tinder? Pine resin was gold for anyone who knew the secrets of starting a fire in the Wild West. This sticky, fragrant substance burned even in wet weather and produced such a bright flame that it could replace a candle or torch. Experienced resin was collected from coniferous trees, pine, spruce, fir. The best source was hardened drippings on the bark, which formed in places where the tree had been naturally damaged. This resin was concentrated and contained the maximum amount of combustible. Fresh, liquid resin was also useful, but it had to be prepared correctly. It was collected in small containers, leather bags or birch bark boxes. Over time, the resin thickened and became easy. To start a fire, the resin was applied to thin, dry twigs or splinters. This made excellent kindling, which ignited at the slightest spark and burned long and brightly. Resinous kindling was so effective that it could eat. Resinous branches, parts of trees with a high resin content, were especially prized. They could be found in places where trees were damaged or where branches broke off naturally. Such branches burned like candles. Native Americans taught settlers how to make torches from resin and bark for nighttime travel. Birch bark was soaked in resin and rolled into a tube. Such a torch burned evenly and was not extinguished by the wind, lighting the way in the darkness of the prairies. When the log house was assembled and caulked, it resembled a solid box. The next step was to create openings for doors and windows. This process required great care so as not to compromise the strength of the entire structure. In winter, resinous materials became especially valuable. When ordinary tinder became damp from snow and fog, resinous shavings remained effective. Some travelers learned how to make artificial resinous kindling. They boiled pieces of bark in resin, creating a concentrated combustible material. Such kindling was compact, could be stored for a long time, and was guaranteed to ignite. The smell of burning resin became an integral part of the romance of the Wild West. This aroma signified warmth, safety, and human presence in the vast wilderness. A resinous fire was not just a source of heat. Blacksmiths and craftsmen who set out for the Wild West brought with them not only tools, but also valuable knowledge about the properties of metals. They knew a secret that could save lives. Iron filings combined with flint produced particularly bright and hot. The door itself was very simple. It was nailed together from several thick boards, fastened crosswise with 2 or 3 slats. These boards were also made by hand, by splitting a log and hewing it to the required thickness. When flint strikes steel, some metal particles break off, and heating up from friction produce sparks. If there are already fine iron filings on the surface of the steel, the number of sparks increases. The filings were applied to the surface of the flint or steel striker. A thin layer was sufficient. The main thing was that the particles evenly covered the striking surface. Upon contact with flint, this method was especially effective in wet weather, when the usual sparks from flint and steel were not hot enough. Burning iron filings had a higher temperature and could ignite even slightly damp tinder. This was No house on the frontier could exist without a hearth. The fireplace or stove was not just a source of heat, but the center of all life in the hut. Food was prepared here, the family gathered around the fire, and it provided light on long winter evenings. The filings were stored in hermetically sealed containers to protect them from moisture. Even a small amount of water could ruin the entire supply, turning it into rusty dust. Therefore, leather bags with wax or small metal boxes with tight lids were used. The winter months in the Wild West were particularly harsh, but they also brought unexpected opportunities. Experienced travelers knew how to turn ice into a powerful lens to focus the sun's rays. To create an ice lens, you needed clear ice without cracks or air bubbles. Ice from standing water bodies, which froze slowly and evenly, was best suited for this purpose. River ice often contained impurities and was less transparent. The lens was cut with a sharp knife, giving it a convex shape on both sides. The central part had to be thicker than the edges, like a regular glass lens. The surface was carefully polished, using the warmth of the hands to melt and smooth out any unevenness. The polishing process required patience and precision. The ice could not be heated too much, lest it begin to melt. At the same time, the surface had to be perfectly smooth in order to effectively focus the sun's rays. The finished lens was held between the sun and the tinder, slowly moving it until the brightest focal spot was obtained. In the cold, the ice lens worked even better than glass, The main problem was time. The ice lens began to melt from the heat of the sun after just a few minutes of operation. Therefore, all preparations, tinder, kindling, firewood, had to be made in advance in order to take advantage of the short operating time of the lens. Some craftsmen learned to make spare lenses, storing them in the shade or burying them in the snow. This allowed them to have a reserve in case. The ice lens method was especially popular among hunters and trappers who spent the winter in the mountains. They valued it for its absolute silence. No sounds of impact or friction that could scare. The first aid kits of Wild West travelers contained not only medicines, but also unexpected aids in obtaining fire. Potassium permanganate, known as potassium permanganate, combined with glycerin created a chemical reaction capable of producing fire without any friction or sparks. It was a true miracle of 19th century chemistry. Potassium permanganate was carried as an antiseptic for treating wounds and disinfecting water. Glycerin was used for medical purposes and as a component of various ointments. The reaction occurred when potassium permanganate crystals were mixed with a few drops of glycerin. After a few seconds or minutes, the mixture spontaneously ignited, producing a bright flame and intense heat. The reaction time depended on the purity of the substance. We have come all the way from a wild tree to a finished house built by the hands of a settler. This story is not just a set of construction techniques. It is a testament to the incredible resilience, intelligence, and fortitude of the people who settled new lands. Every notch, every carved groove, every stone in the hearth was filled with meaning and hard work. These simple huts were not just dwellings. They were a symbol of man's victory over the wilderness, a symbol of hope in the beginning of a new life. What skills and knowledge of the settlers do you think could be useful today? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the past.